In today's video, I tease you with the prospect of harvesting some winter squash. Unfortunately, I just never got round to it. So we're going to have to save that pleasure for next week. Hello and welcome! The brassicas I planted last week and their netting cage have all been doing very nicely over this rainy, showery week. I do have some brassica starts left over from that process, so I've decided I'm going to plant them in the bed next to it. I've already made a start and weeded it, given it a sprinkle of blood, fish and bone, and gathered all my supplies together ready for planting. A bag of homemade compost, some strulch to go on top once they're in, a few slug pellets, essential in this part of the world with its damp climate. The slugs and snails love it and love munching our plants given half a chance. So I don't plan to give them any chance at all. A treasure I did rescue while weeding this bed is about a dozen gladioli that were growing very happily in here. But I'm going to use this space for growing edible vegetables, not flowers. I'm going to move these gladioli down into my new flowering meadow space. I've been very kindly gifted half a dozen hollyhock starts and some wormwood. So I shall be putting that in the flowering meadow as well. Get some more plants in to expand that space for next year. So, compost to top dress this is next on my list. Move you out the way. I will look at you up there. There we go. Compost. So once I've got my brassicas planted today, I think I'll go and harvest a few of the pumpkin squashies. It's going to continue being rainy and wet because some of them are looking ready. So I'm going to harvest them now. I was planning to wait till later in the week when the grandchildren were with me. A great fun activity for them to join in with. But sadly, the day they're due to be here, it's forecast to be wet, rain and thunderstorms. Not the best day to be out in the garden harvesting pumpkins, unfortunately. I have a few onion sets today that should have been planted this spring but didn't get planted. So I'm going to put them in between my brassicas. We'll see if they can grow over the winter. Give us an earlier crop next summer. I'm so used to planting onion sets in the spring and harvesting them late in the summer. It's a bit odd to be planting them in the autumn. Let's start in the middle and work out to the sides. Just last week, oh, a potato. Last year I grew potatoes in this bed. I found a few when I was pulling up the weeds. This week I'm going to prepare all of my holes first, rather than planting one or two plants at a time. A bit of speed digging and then some watering and we'll be ready to plant. I like to put water in the bottom of every single plant hole, even though it has been raining lots and the ground is nice and damp. The roots are where the plants are going to want that water. Some more speed gardening, laying out my plants next to the holes I'm going to put them in. Well, this looks very weedy and pathetic. It's been munched on by something. It's lost a few leaves down the bottom. We're yellowing. But I have a hole, so I'm going to plant it. I have an assortment of brassicas. There's red cabbage, a couple of Savoy cabbages, and I think some standard white cabbages as well.
kohlrabi and romanesco, along with some sprouting broccoli, all mixed up together, filling this bed. Now let's plant those onion sets.
I got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, oh 13, unlucky for some. This little onion set is already starting a little green shoot, so it's ready to be gone. I'm going to pop it there.
Now those onions are planted, time to scatter a thin layer of strolch all over the bed, just to help deter the slugs and snails. I'm also going to scatter some sluggo pellets around as well. I plan to scatter a few sluggo pellets on the grass around this bed, as well as on the bed itself. This week's netting support framework does fit inside the bed, but I have 2 different pieces of frame. They're not the same, but I'm sure they'll work perfectly well.
I will use a couple of ground cover securing pegs. I'm not going to stick them in straight up and down. I'm going to get in at an angle. So anything wants to lift it, it has to tear this up. Surprising how secure that is. So with my ground stakes, I'm not putting them in straight up and down. I'm pushing them in at an angle. I'm a bit close to that cabbage actually, we'll move it over a bit. There we go. So I'm going to put them in at an angle. And that's surprisingly secure.
And lastly, a covering of fine netting. Keep out the cabbage white butterflies, the rabbits, the deer, the birds, anything else that might want to be nibbling on my brassicas. A few bricks around the edge to help weight it down.
Wonderful. 2 nets of brassicas planted.
I'm sure you can all hear the wind, and those little brassica tents are sitting nice and still. Perfect.
I said I was going to go and harvest some squash, but I got distracted and cut some grass instead before it rains again tomorrow, and stacked it up on my latest new garden bed. The rest of my new meadow garden is settling in nicely. Lots of things surviving and doing very well. And the dahlias, of course, looking splendid. The dahlias are looking great still. They're very much an autumn flower. I'm just noticing this variegated shrub. It's going to need a little pruning. Because down here, some of its new sprigs of growth, there's another one there, are not variegated. They're the solid green. So if I leave this to carry on growing, we'll get more and more plain green leaves. So I'm going to take this all the way back to where it joins the tree and cut it off. So we just leave us with all this beautiful variegation to carry on growing and spreading. So this is how they should look, but I have a couple sprigs of growth down here, just plain green. After a deer munching his way through the garden, eating all the flower buds of my Gladiolis, I did manage to save this one, spotted its buds before he did, and wrapped it up in chicken wire. I've been super pleased with this particular sunflower. It's got so many heads on it. They're not huge. They're as big as my hand though. And there's lots of them. These are all coming off one big stem. The bees are having a lovely time. This one is particularly popular.
A little close-up of those happy, fluffy little bumblebees.
So here we have the caterpillar of the cabbage white butterfly, happily munching his way through some nasturtium leaves. I'm very happy to grow nasturtiums. The caterpillars can munch their way through them rather than my cabbages and brassicas. And I get a few extra pretty flowers as well. Oh, there's another one. Oh, too fast, too fast, too fast. There we go. Where is he? Yum, yum, yum. Then, while I was walking around cutting grass, I spotted some blackberries that were ripe and ready for picking, and an elderberry bush covered in elderberries. Now I've got them harvested. It's just starting to rain, so I've taken refuge back in the house. Maybe we will be picking squash and pumpkins for the grandchildren because I didn't get it done today.